Hey, this is Mark, and this is episode 2 of the Why Are We Still Doing This podcast. This is the time of the year when we slowly realize that all the Valentine's Day candy has bled into the Easter candy in the house, right? Like all that leftover Valentine's Day candy has somehow made it to April or May, has infiltrated Easter eggs. I've realized that from Halloween to Easter, there is a constant influx of treats. Mostly candy, but generally speaking, nothing redeeming. Zero nutrients. First, there's Halloween, the mother lode of candy acquisitions for kids, right? And sometimes you get so much candy, like my kids got this past year, that it hangs around long enough to start to blend in with the Valentine's Day candy. You get so much candy to the point that you put it in the freezer about a month after Halloween, but then the Christmas season hits, and it's nonstop Rice Krispie treats on a stick in the shape of a snowman. Everywhere. Every organization or club that you or your family is involved in has some sort of Christmas party. So you shove chocolate in your mouth for practically the entire month of December. Then January hits and you're like, okay, time to get my fitness goals in line. And Valentine's Day comes in and says, so about those New Year's resolutions. That was short-lived, eh? New year, new you, right? More like, new year, eh. Then depending on how the calendar lines up, Jesus is just around the corner hiding chocolate eggs. And speaking of Halloween, why are we still doing trunk or treat? First of all, the term trunk or treat sounds like a kidnapping situation. Get in my trunk, there's treats. It's like the opposite of everything we were told when we were kids. The infamous van with candy situation. Side note, I've driven 2 minivans in my life, and I will die on this hill that minivans are awesome. Great for loading a drum set, for playing punk rock music, or being a teenager and passing out in the back after a long evening of sucking down carbohydrates in the middle of a field. There are way too many opportunities for children to get candy in October nowadays. Like, I love fun, but it's like that saying, if Christmas came more than once a year, would it be as special? When I was growing up in the 80s, we had one chance to get as much candy as possible. We would sprint from each house, as trick-or-treat was only a couple hours. Kids were pulling like a 4.3 in the 40-yard dash, going from house to house. 2 hours out of the 365 days to get as much candy as possible. It was a mission. Like, quick, it's 7:28 and trick-or-treat ends in 2 minutes. I know we can hit these last 15 houses before they turn their lights off. This past Halloween, my son got over half a brown paper shopping bag full of candy, just during trick-or-treat hours, and not including trunk-or-treat at his school. By the end of the night on Halloween, people were just giving him handfuls of candy, just saying, here, and grabbing a fistful and dumping it into his bag. Like this past Halloween, I remember seeing a lot of TikToks with people sitting on their porch with a bowl full of candy like, where the hell is everyone? Is trick-or-treat dying? I do remember our local mall doing a trick-or-treat back in the day, and that was cool. I loved hanging out at the mall, and it was just cool to walk from store to store and get candy. And thinking about it now, it was kind of weird rolling up to stores you'd never go into just because you wanted a Twix. I don't remember if it was all of the stores that participated, but I think most of them just had someone near the front of the store and you didn't actually have to go into the store. Because I think I would get kind of red in the face if I was an 11-year-old boy and had to go into Fredericks of Hollywood because someone told me they were handing out full-size bars. I'm sure that's not the only full-size thing they had in the store. My dad actually took me into a Fredericks of Hollywood once to look for something for my mom, maybe when I was like 9. I think it was one of the 2 times in my childhood where I realized there might be some sort of amicable relationship between my mom and dad who were living under one roof. I remember my mom's response was, "He took you in there?" I've never understood buying lingerie for your partner as a gift for something like Valentine's Day, like something more complex other than regular underwear. Like, here's something you've never tried on before and you have no clue if it's something you're going to feel comfortable in. Anyway, trunk or treat. It's one thing when it's a community event, like a school where kids can go and see familiar faces dressed up in costumes like, "Hey, Mrs. Thomas, that's a great Beetlejuice costume. Wow, it's great to see you having fun and not yelling at us at lunch." But seriously, it's always good for students and their teachers to interact outside of school hours at a school function like this. Growing up, we thought our teachers slept at the school, which they probably actually do now because they can't afford a house. So I am totally for a trunk or treat of this nature, something organized by the school. It's one thing if it's a community event, again, but what annoys the hell out of me is when a car dealership or a real estate agency or an insurance company does a trunk or treat. Because it's just a cheap sales tactic to get people into their business. And I don't like it when those places hand out candy that might ultimately give a child enough candy to replace the main event of Halloween, that is trick or treat. Basically swaying the parents to say, well, you've already got enough candy, right? So why don't you get together with your friends so mom and dad can have some drinks on Halloween night? Like when Country Hyundai Kia dealership or whatever throws a trunk or treat, what's the motive? To get adults to come in and go, "Hey, Brad, that's a nice looking Kia Rio you got out there on the lot." Like, it's a networking thing. It's not about the kids at that point. And it's just too much candy. Leave the candy distribution to trick-or-treating on Halloween night and schools doing trunk or treat. That's it. Walmart shouldn't do it. Target shouldn't do it. Insurance companies shouldn't do it. And what really drives me crazy is when homeowners just simply refuse to participate in Halloween and trick or treat. And don't come at me with, "My father's 93 and can't get up from a chair." No, it's not that. If you have the means to purchase candy, number one, and you are mobile and can get up and down from a seated position with ease, and you live in a busy neighborhood where there are a lot of children who come out for trick or treat, it is your obligation to give out candy on Halloween. I do not understand people that just don't do it. This is like jury duty, people. This is your civil obligation as a homeowner in a busy residential area. You hand out candy. You don't want to hand out candy? Then go live in a shack in the middle of the woods. Like, I don't get the people who are just like, "I'm going to turn off my light and watch 24-hour news stations Halloween night." I feel like those people who don't participate in trick-or-treat had something really bad happen to them on Halloween as a kid. Like they got one too many apples and toothbrushes as a kid. There was always that one house, right? Handed out something like that. Then they wanted you to come in and talk about the Lord. or a timeshare. I don't know. Or maybe they had one too many a Halloween where they were forced to wear a coat over their Ninja Turtles costume. But don't come at me with, my grandmother can't walk. No, it's not that. And please don't come at me with, Mark, some people may not live in a place that's safe to go trick-or-treating. Okay, I get that too. I was lucky to have access to a neighborhood that was flooded with kids for trick-or-treating. I lived on a mountain as a kid, and no one ever came to my house for trick-or-treat. However, I would venture into town with friends where all the hot spots were. Houses were just really spread out where I lived. Anyway, so I was able to trick-or-treat. I was luckily able to trick-or-treat in areas where I knew the people, I knew the houses, and both the kids and the adults were able to see each other. Adults able to see what fun costumes kids had, and kids realizing that someone they knew lived at a house that they went to. I don't know why I just thought of this, but I got attacked online once, commenting on a New York Times article regarding the cleanliness of the living space of people who wear shoes in their house. And I simply commented, people who don't recycle wear shoes in their house. Just a vague, comedic, generalized observation, hoping to get a laugh. But like a comedy club where you have people that have never been to a comedy show before, someone gets pissed off. That led to someone responding to me saying, I am disabled and have a hard time getting shoes on and off. And I'm like, this is why I should not post with sarcasm, because it's going to fall flat. It ain't that deep. I did a show last year with this comedian from the city, and he had a bit that I thought was really funny. It was something like he wanted to start a conservative training program for liberals so they could just not care about shit. Like not having to recycle. And seriously, regardless of your politics, if you can't laugh at that, then I don't know, there's no hope for you. And I'm a liberal guy. I know we drive Subarus and eat tapas. Like, I can take it. I always loved the warnings we would get as kids about candy and finding candy laced with drugs. Like, that was scary. Until I realized that drugs are expensive. Drug dealers are not giving away freebies. If they were really doing that, they would at least leave a business card so you could call them for more. Like, damn, this is some good shit. I wish they left their card. Speaking of going door to door, let's talk about youth sports fundraisers and how the traditional methods of fundraising are somewhat antiquated. When I was a kid and in high school playing sports, we did one of two things. We did a car wash at a local dealership, or we went door to door asking for bottles and cans. Bottles and cans. 5 cents each. All that work to fill up the back of a truck with 20 bags of cans that equaled out to about $11. That was a shitload of work. It's worse than the logic of starting a Christmas tree farm. Like, in 10 years, I'll have $400. I'll never forget going door to door asking for bottles and cans, raising money for my high school soccer team, and this one house we came upon. This little old lady answered the door, and I said, "We're collecting bottles and cans for the Hoosick Valley boys soccer team." She says, "Oh, sure, I'll be right back." My friend and I waited at the door for a minute while she went back into her house, and she came out with a big paper grocery bag and said, "Here you go." "Thank you," we said, as we took the bag from her and turned to walk back toward my car. But that's when I stopped dead in my tracks and realized what was actually in the bag. There were cans, all right, but not soda cans or beer cans, but cans. Like empty cans of crushed tomatoes, empty cans of creamed corn, empty cans of tuna. I guess I should have been more specific about these, quote, cans I was asking about. Oh, and also in the bag was half a ceramic plate that looked like it still had some scrambled eggs stuck to it. At that point, I just took it with me and put it in the back of my van. Like, what am I going to do? Knock on the door and be like, here's your trash back. Poor woman. That's probably how she disposed of trash. Like, she's on a fixed income, can't afford trash removal, so she just hoards it all and waits for unsuspecting high school kids running bottle and can drives to take them for her. So yeah, it was either walking around town to the homes of total strangers or a car wash. My soccer team did a car wash almost every year, and it wasn't bad, but we definitely were put to work. There was this local car dealership, and they would let us use their service bay to wash and vacuum cars. And I remember people had the option for just a wash or a wash and a vacuum. And I remember vacuuming out people's cars and sometimes vacuuming up things that I was like, should I have sucked that up? We'd be there for a few hours, leave soaking wet. For some reason, the girls' soccer team car wash always got more business. But those fundraisers seem to be a thing of the past. Fundraisers now are basically, here's a link, enter your credit card info. There's no catalog to order candles from, no cookies to buy, no number one dad mug, no Hickory Farms box set of sausages and cheeses we all bought for our grandparents in the 80s that ultimately gave them high cholesterol. Nothing. It's just enter your credit card. And this company organizing, it takes a percentage. But I do think that youth sports teams have it way better than we did when it comes to gear. Like my daughter last year for softball had a custom fitted helmet with her number on it for her travel team. I remember having to measure her head with a tape measure. Didn't we all just share like 4 helmets in Little League in the 80s? They get new uniforms practically every year. And I'm not talking about a new t-shirt. I'm talking about new pants, breathable tops, new softball bags. I think kids just carried their shit with their 2 hands back then. But there's so many like accessories that youth sports kids wear too nowadays. Like sleeves, wristbands, leg sleeves, which I don't know if it's a sleeve or they just buy leggings and cut one leg off. I don't know these things. I'm sure it's a compression sleeve for a leg, but they might as well just make a weighted blanket for athletes at this point. So, but going back to owning a minivan and high school and how awesome that was, it made me think again of how useful a minivan was at the time. So, for one, we used to party in the woods as teenagers. Living in a 1-stoplight town, that's what you did. And I don't think kids do that anymore. I really think my generation retired that activity. However, in 2025, I think the one thing to fear other than cops coming and breaking up the party is those goddamn deer ticks. We have a lot of those in the Northeast. And so we would park our cars at a trailhead parking lot, walk maybe 1/8 of a mile into the trees, make a fire, and hang out with our Zimas, our bottles of Arbor Mist and occasional hard ciders. At the end of the night, I'd walk/crawl back to my car and fall asleep in a cozy, spacious 1988 Plymouth Voyager. I took the third row seat out of my car, which opened up so much room for activities. One, it was incredibly easy to load my drum set in and out. And two, I could fall asleep in the back by putting down a camping mat and sleep with my legs underneath the second row. If I did that now, I think it would cripple me and accelerate my back pain by about 30 years. But I really don't think kids party in the woods anymore. I don't think a lot of kids, unfortunately, know what woods are. So, moving on. Let's talk about relationships. And why are we still doing marriages? What do you do when you have a situation where you know that someone is being cheated on and they are completely oblivious to the infidelity, and you despise the person that's cheating with every fiber of your body? What do you do when you have someone who has hurt someone very close to you and is now doing the same thing to someone new? This person is toxic, selfish, a gaslighter, a complete narcissist, but at the same time needs constant validation. Most people would not waste their time and energy on overthinking this, but there are times when I unfortunately do. I know it's a waste of time, a waste of energy. I'm thinking of that Metallica song, Wasting My Hate. Like, why am I wasting my energy on this person? And often I find the answer to be, that's just how I'm programmed. I want to see those people get their comeuppance. I see their Facebook posts, living it up with the girlies, brunches, just knowing full well what a horrible person they are, having their cake and eating it too. No remorse for the fact that they're just a tornado just destroying lives in their path. It's one of those things where I want this person to be held accountable. And there's not many people I feel this strongly about, but I want their entire empire to come crashing down. I remember after my friend and that person separated years ago, he said to me, after having a few drinks, "Why did you let me marry Satan?" And my response was, "Because you wouldn't have listened anyway." Why can't we be honest in those situations? Why do we not plead with our closest friends to get out of Dodge when they're in a horrible situation with a horrible person? Are we worried we're going to hurt their feelings? Are we afraid we're going to push them away? Are we afraid of ruining our friendship with them? I think we are sometimes. And when we gather the courage to do so, that discussion can become heated and intense because we care so much about that person. However, in my experience, in my circle of friends, we keep our mouths shut, unfortunately. Historically, but I think we've grown up. So many of my closest friends, good people with good hearts, have had their lives destroyed by the absolute worst people. And some of them have been horrible the whole time, while others somehow morphed into this succubus overnight. It's amazing how someone can be so fun, so exciting, so adventurous, be the best thing in the world to you at one point, and go on to destroy everything you have. How does that happen? Are we missing the signs? How do we not see it? We often look back on those times in our life when we're with someone awful, and we say to ourselves, what was I thinking? Well, for one, you weren't. Your vision was clouded. Your brain wasn't fully developed yet. You were probably in your late teens, early 20s for one. You didn't have to make real life decisions at that point. You were still staying out until 3 in the morning, coming home and brushing your teeth on the floor of your bathroom because you couldn't physically stand. I was thinking about high school sweethearts recently, and I think that high school sweethearts rarely end up together unless those two people are fully formed and mature from the get-go. Most, not all, people I know that were together in high school and went on to get married ain't married anymore. Like, for a high school couple to be successful later in life, they both have to come from really functional families. You know, the ones that sit down at the table for meals, apologize to each other, and don't say things to their kids like, "Oh, you think you're stressed?" When you get two dysfunctional people, never going to work. When you have two dysfunctional teenagers dating in high school, it's really fun. There's a lot of fun with two dysfunctional teenagers in a relationship. Smoking weed, sneaking into movies, stealing stop signs. At some point, one of two things is going to happen in those kinds of relationships. One of them is going to grow as a person in more than one way and realize that they're a different person than they once were. And their partner can't give them what they want anymore. Or, two, they both stay the same and become a complete train wreck when they hit adult life and real decisions have to be made. Think about your high school boyfriend or girlfriend. I think about my high school girlfriend and thank my lucky stars that we never got back together. We almost did at one point. Now, I'm going to preface this story with, it took me a while to realize that it was not the person that I missed being with, but the time in my life when that person was most present. Follow me? 20 years ago, I was in an awful relationship. Just awful. To the point I was just numb to it all. I had been with this person for 4 years, and it took me years later after that relationship ended to realize, Jesus, I didn't even like this person. And I lived with them. And while I was in that relationship, my old high school girlfriend and I would talk on occasion. Long story short, one day on the phone, she brought up all the what-ifs in our relationship. We'd been friends for years after we broke up, and we both felt there was always something still there. She and I always connected from time to time during college, and she always compared every boyfriend she ever had to me. And I remember sitting in my apartment one day, roughly a couple months before I eventually moved out of that apartment and that horrible relationship, and she called. And I remember she told me she was sitting in a parking lot waiting to go into a store. And I feel like big life-changing conversations always happen in a car in the parking lot of like a Target or a Lowe's. And it's raining. It's pouring rain, just like the movies. And the topic of us came up. She talked to me about all the what ifs of us. And at that time in my life, she was the one that got away. At this point in my life, I'm fortunate that she did. Not because she was a bad person. It just would never have worked out. She said to me, "What would you say if I asked you about us being in a relationship together?" And at this point in time, I was in an awful relationship. As I mentioned before, was totally miserable, numb, and had no idea what I was doing with my life. She was also in a relationship and had been for a couple of years. And when she asked me about getting back together, I didn't know what to say. When she asked me that, I paused for a long time and I said, "I don't know." But I know she wanted to, otherwise she wouldn't have asked. I wanted to say yes, but felt that even though I was with someone who I didn't care for at all, I felt like I was doing something wrong. Fast forward 2 weeks later, I'm in Washington, D.C. visiting a friend, and I get a voicemail from her. I remember having to play the recording probably 3 times before I could finally understand what she was saying. And I remember her saying, "Hey, Mark," like, "Hey, old buddy, old pal, my boyfriend is in the room with me and hearing this call." And when I finally figured out what she was saying, I realized that she called me to tell me she was engaged. And the tone in her voice did not seem like she was excited. It matched the energy of your mom calling to tell you she got a good deal on some bagels at the supermarket. Wait, no, that's a terrible analogy. Because moms actually get really excited about that kind of stuff. Anyway, the message was somewhat distorted, but I remember hearing next was something about asked me to marry him, gave me a ring. 2 weeks ago, she prompted the question of us getting back together. Now, engaged. Weeks went by, and in those weeks I made many attempts to talk to her. She just wasn't returning my calls. Ghosted me, as the kids say today. By the time we actually had a conversation about us and the possibility of us getting back together, it was almost a year later. And I remember she told me how she felt like she knew her boyfriend was going to propose and that she couldn't go back now that that happened. This is the Cliff Notes version of that story. But I thought about this girl every single day while I was in that incredibly toxic relationship with my girlfriend. And I wanted to get back into that relationship with her so badly. But it took me a long time to realize it wasn't her that I was longing after. I was longing after the time in my life when things were so much simpler. High school was an amazing time in my life. I played in a ska band that recorded an album. I played sports. I played in the school band. I had many circles of friends. I just felt like on top of the world. And after high school, I went to college, and I got involved with this one girl, and I was miserable most of the time I was with her. She was just manipulative, just incredibly jealous. And the last year of our relationship was just numb. And I wanted to go back. It was a time in my life that I was longing after, not so much that person. My wife and I were part of many bridal parties over the course of our lives. We went to so many weddings in our late 20s, early 30s, and out of all the weddings that we went to, I would say that 80% of them ended in divorce. And out of all the weddings that we were a part of, the wedding party, I'd say almost 90% of them ended in divorce. And at least a handful of them going in, I thought, there's no way these two people should be getting married. Like, imagine sitting there at what is a joyous occasion, people laughing, crying, tears of joy, waiting for the bride and groom to be introduced. The DJ's music is pumping. Thousands and thousands of dollars are being spent on this day. And I'm sitting in the back of the ballroom just thinking, these people are toast in like 8 to 9 months. But hey, these bacon-wrapped asparagus are dynamite. I've rented many a formal wear for weddings in my life. Like, can I at least get some of my deposit back on some of these tux rentals? That's one thing I would never do if I were to get married again. Rent a tuxedo. Stupid and waste of money. Here's what you do. You go to JCPenney with your friends. You all pick out the same suit, black, blue, whatever, shirt and tie, and you're done. You'll pay less than you would to rent a tuxedo. And guess what? You've all got a brand new suit. No one's going to notice your suit came from JCPenney. No one's going to care. A friend of mine who divorced his wife ended up burning his suit in his backyard. Gave it like a Jedi funeral. And I was in that wedding. And I waited years to finally tell him it was the worst fitting suit I've ever worn in my life. And this goes back to just like not being honest about relationships with our friends. I ended up donating that suit to the school that my wife worked at the time, so some high school kid could wear it on a job interview. And he probably didn't get the job because the suit fit so badly. But my friend told me that when he burned his suit from his wedding, he listened really closely and to the crackle of the fire and said he could hear his ex-wife complaining. So why are all these people getting a divorce? Why are all these people separating? I have friends that have already been married twice. I have a friend who never thought in his wildest dreams that he would ever have got a divorce. I never once saw any positive interaction between my mother and my father. I don't ever remember seeing them hug once, maybe a kiss, I can't remember. But my wife and I both knew what a marriage should not be. We thought, why the hell would we get married knowing everything that we've witnessed about marriage to be absolutely awful? We realized that marriage does require work. Marriage takes work. And it gets easier as time goes on, but that beginning phase is crucial for a good foundation. That's why I hate these stupid shows like The Bachelor and The Bachelorette. You get two people put in these ridiculously lavish and expensive experiences to the point that I could probably fall in love with Cookie Monster if put in such a situation. It's a fantasy world. I want to see a Bachelor show where two people meet and they immediately have to fold a giant pile of laundry. Just a, hey, I'm Jeff. Hi, I'm Sarah. And throw them into a fake living room with a pile of laundry on the couch so high it looks like Mount Everest. Then you get to see how compatible people are. You really gonna fold it like that? My hypothesis as to why so many of my friends that got married, eventually divorced, is that growing up they saw what a good marriage should look like. However, maybe what they failed to realize is that it took a lot of work. It took a lot of behind-the-scenes work to keep the ship afloat. Maybe they didn't see that. I saw what marriages should not be and learned what a relationship should not be. Also, people are stubborn. and can't admit when they're wrong. People don't know how to compromise. I heard a great quote recently that went something like, marriage should be a 60-40 split with each person putting in 60%. I would be a great goddamn marriage counselor, full stop. I would be the John Taffer of marriage counselors. If you don't know who John Taffer is, watch the show Bar Rescue, and you'll understand my point. I just tell it like it is. I have no training. I have a master's degree in education. But between my parents' marriage, my own toxic relationships, talking about both of those for years in therapy, and seeing it almost on a daily basis for years working in the field of mental health, I can tell you what's wrong with your relationship in the first 5 minutes. That is one thing I have a cocky, somewhat arrogant confidence in. Aside from trivial competitions like miniature golf, bowling, or word searches. There are times when I've had to cover a class at the school that I work in, and the teacher has a word search for the kids to do. And I just say to the kids, I'm going to beat all of you at this word search. They're usually like 5th or 6th graders. But if anyone here can finish this before me, I'll bring in donuts for the whole class tomorrow. And I'll give you a 5-minute head start. And the anger and frustration they display when I yell, done, makes it all worth it. I think the best therapists are the ones who had the shittiest upbringings. If you had a terrible, traumatic upbringing and you were able to pull yourself out of a hole to the point you go on to graduate college with a master's degree, I'm going to take that therapist over anyone who grew up in a house that resembles family ties. Not that growing up in a family ties house is bad. I think it just means you relate to shitty situations more. I think a big piece of why marriages fail is because people get married, have children, and still try to do the things they did when they were 23. It's Friday night. You're married and have 2 children under the age of 8. And you know what happens on Friday nights with your family? You put on a goddamn movie and you order pizza. You're not going out to a bar. Fuck that. You spend as much time with your kids in the first 10 years of their life, because after that, they're gone. Once they hit 10, 11, 12 years old, they want to go out with their friends. They want to go to the mall with those friends. They're having sleepovers with their friends. Mom and dad take a back seat. And that's okay. That's normal. Movie night is going to take a back seat. And that's why you do movie night as much as possible for as long as you can when they're under 10. You've got 10 solid years. It goes by quickly. But after those 10 years, you still have to make it a point to do stuff with them. Take them on a special trip. I took my daughter to Washington, D.C. over April vacation last year. And it was one of the best trips I ever had. Except for the fact our first night there, she threw up around 12:30 in the morning. And I was frantically searching for cleaning supplies in our Airbnb. We toured the White House. We toured the Capitol. We got to sit in on a Ways and Means Committee hearing. That was so cool. It was like walking into C-SPAN. But someone always gets sick on vacation. I took my son to Disney World for 3 days last year, and just the 2 of us. And he wound up getting sick our second night there. And I felt like I had a kidney stone brewing and was never quite comfortable, but luckily it wasn't a stone. So we didn't get to do as much as we wanted, but when he looks back, he's going to remember little things like playing ping pong by the pool, or riding in an Uber for the first time, and watching Bluey for hours together in the hotel room because he was too sick to do much else. But I loved it. I remember sitting there in our room, him not feeling well, and just watching Bluey for hours because he wasn't feeling well at all. And it was raining too. So even if we wanted to go out, we would have gotten soaked. But I kept thinking, man, this is going to be a funny story someday. I remember my wife telling me about someone she knew, a woman, who had been with her fiancé for over a year and never once farted in front of him. How is that possible? And why would you want to hide that? Like, that's one of the best parts of marriage. Letting one silently rip under the covers and just wait for their reaction while you violently shake because you're trying to hold back your laughter. It's the best part about growing old together. Grossing each other out with bodily functions. My family hates it when I buy Kashi cereal. 9 grams of fiber per serving. My wife will sometimes just walk into a room, take one whiff and say, "Did you have Kashi?" Maybe that's the secret. Maybe that's the secret to a happy marriage. Showing the other person your most disgusting qualities and then accepting every bit of it. And when I say disgusting qualities, I don't mean like yelling at you when the dishes aren't done. I'm saying having the courage to let them know when they've been sick for 2 days and they emerge from their separate sleeping quarters because they're kind enough to do so to not get you sick, and they're just dripping with sweat and sickness and snot. You can say to them, "Oh my God, you need to shower." I think your spouse should be the first person you call when you need to tell someone, quote, "It's 10:30 a.m. and I've already used the bathroom at work 4 times. They don't need to know that, but you feel compelled to tell someone. And you text them in the middle of the day. And when you sit back and think about it, they really don't need to know that at 11 a.m. That's something that can totally wait until you get home. But you text them. If there wasn't text message, you probably wouldn't make it a point to make a phone call for that. But you tell them because they're the only person on this earth that would tolerate a message like that. I think social media has influenced how big news is delivered between friends, specifically those that maybe don't see each other that often. Like, sometimes there's not as much to talk about when you see someone in person because they've already shared it online with the world. Like, "Hey, I finished my master's degree." "Yeah, I saw that, and I wrote congratulations on the post." I remember when I got engaged, I called a handful of my closest friends to tell them the news. Called my mom, my dad, my sister. Now would have probably been a group text. Calling each individual person just sounds like way too much work. Young people, what do you do? People in their 20s, you get engaged. Are you calling individual friends? Or are you just doing one massive group text? Or are you putting it out on Facebook or whatever social media vessel and calling it a day? For a lot of people, they create this fantasy world on social media where it looks like this amazing, healthy relationship when in reality it's just incredibly toxic. And when you know it's the opposite of healthy, you can't help but find it annoying. I know because I've been there. I think my advice to kids today, and I'm talking to kids in their teens, is to be careful of the people that are a little too fun. Like, it's great to be with someone who is fun, like going to amusement parks, enjoys playing board games, exploring new places, but avoiding the people whose fun requires a large percentage of the fun to come at the expense of other people, like throwing shaving cream balloons off a bridge onto cars. Because I feel like those people that are having that extreme, dangerous fun are never good at the relationship stuff. They're never gonna be good at balancing the responsibilities of managing a household some days. Like, I'm a fun guy, but I'm not fun all the time. If I put all of my energy into fun, I'd have no energy to fold laundry, be an adult. But when you're young, that's all there is, quote, fun. That's all there is fun when you're in your teens. The other person sees that you are fun all the time. The responsibility piece hasn't come in yet. Women love the bad boys when they're young. They're fun, dangerous, living on the edge. But they're not going to do the dishes when they get older. When you're putting the pedal to the floor with, quote, fun when you're young, it's just not going to be easy when you hit like 30. Because once you hit 30, I feel life hits you hard and fast. And stuff like, you want to go to bed at 9. That's one thing that creeps up on you, and you both love it, but also wonder, why is this happening? But that's a whole nother topic for another day. I'm going to wrap this up now. Thank you for tuning in. If you have questions, comments, anything you want to talk about in regard to what I talked about, you can email me at whyarewestilldoingthispodcast@gmail.com. whyarewestilldoingthispodcast@gmail.com. I will see everybody in episode 3. Thank you. See you guys.